Welcome to Silent Crime Case, the podcast that dives deep into the most perplexing criminal cases, where truth often lies buried beneath layers of mystery. Today, we take you into the tragic and puzzling death of David Hale, a respected professor at the University of Colorado Boulder. His life came to a shocking end in March of 1988, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. Was his death the result of a simple accident? Did David take his own life? Or was there something more sinister lurking behind this seemingly ordinary tragedy? Boulder, Colorado, a town nestled at the foothills of the majestic Rocky Mountains. Known for its tranquil beauty and thriving university culture, it was the last place anyone expected such a mystery to unfold. Yet, this peaceful setting became the backdrop for one of the most intriguing cases in its history. One filled with secrets, lies, and betrayal. Join us as we unravel the complexities of this case and explore the life and mysterious death of David Hale. Could this tragic incident have been more than what it appeared? Prepare to dive deep into the tangled web of relationships, betrayal, and the haunting events that led to this professor's untimely death. David Hale was no ordinary man. At 46 years old, he had established himself as a brilliant professor of geology at the University of Colorado. His salt-and-pepper hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and calm demeanor made him a familiar and respected figure on campus. Students flocked to his lectures, not just for his expertise, but for his ability to make the Earth's geological formations come alive with wonder. However, David's life was not without struggles. Behind the mask of success, David battled bipolar disorder, and for years he fought alcoholism. Though he had maintained sobriety for some time, his addiction had left deep scars. His struggles with his mental health added another layer of complexity to his life. Despite these internal battles, David never let his challenges overshadow his love for his family or his dedication to his work. His family life was equally strained. He was married to Sarah Hale, a professor of English literature at the same university. While they had once shared mutual respect and a strong intellectual bond, their marriage had deteriorated over the years, becoming a battleground for growing tensions. Friends and colleagues often saw the couple in heated arguments, with their relationship becoming a source of gossip. Still, David remained committed to one thing: his son, Victor. Victor, a bright 13-year-old, attended the Colorado School for the Deaf. He was the light of David's life. To show his love, David had dedicated himself to converting the attic of their family home into a special bedroom for Victor. He spent hours meticulously planning and working on this renovation, determined to create a sanctuary for his son. Victor idolized his father. To him, David wasn't just a brilliant professor but a loving dad who always made time for him despite his busy schedule. Every weekend, the two would work together in the attic, discussing geology, school, and life in general. As Victor's bedroom project neared completion, he could barely contain his excitement to move into the room his father had lovingly created for him. Now, standing in that same attic, Victor could only remember the day everything changed. His world, once filled with warmth, had been shattered. This project, however, would be David's last. The tragedy that occurred during the attic's final renovation left his family and the community of Boulder grappling with questions of whether David's death was truly an accident or something far more sinister. On a sunny March afternoon in 1988, David Hale was hard at work in the attic of his family home. The day had started like any other, with David focused on the final touches of his renovation project. The attic was filled with boxes of insulation, tools, and blueprints, a testament to his commitment to creating a perfect space for his son Victor. But something went terribly wrong. As David ascended the ladder with his tools in hand, tragedy struck. In a sudden, inexplicable moment, he lost his footing and plummeted from the attic to his death. The fall was quick, the sound of his body hitting the floor echoing throughout the otherwise silent house. His wife, Sarah, was downstairs grading papers when she heard the crash. Panic set in as she rushed upstairs to find her husband lying motionless on the ground. His body was twisted and his face pale. She immediately knew something was terribly wrong. Shaking with fear and disbelief, Sarah dialed 911, her trembling fingers struggling to find the right buttons. When emergency services arrived, it was clear there was nothing they could do. David Hale was pronounced dead at the scene. What appeared to be a tragic accident, a simple fall during a home improvement project, would soon take a darker turn as investigators began to uncover details that didn't add up. The first responders were struck by the odd positioning of David's body and the lack of any obvious reason for his fall. There was no visible defect in the ladder or the attic flooring. But there was something off about Sarah, though shaken. she appeared unusually composed for someone who had just witnessed such a tragedy. This incident would lead investigators down a path filled with secrets and suspicion. Detective Michael J. Miller of the Boulder Police Department was assigned to investigate the mysterious death of David Hale. Known for his sharp attention to detail, Miller quickly realized this was no ordinary case. Sarah was brought in for a second round of questioning. This time, the interrogation focused more on the possibility of foul play. Sarah's emotional state fluctuated as she described the stress she had been under in recent months. She claimed that David's mental health struggles had made him increasingly difficult to live with. However, she steadfastly denied having anything to do with his fall. As the investigation continued, detectives also delved deeper into David's mental health. Could his bipolar disorder and history of alcoholism have contributed to his death? The team interviewed his doctors and therapists, who revealed that David had been dealing with significant emotional turmoil in the weeks leading up to his death. The more Miller learned about David's personal battles, the more he questioned whether his death was truly an accident, or if someone close to him had taken matters into their own hands. The forensic team continued to analyze every detail of the crime scene, searching for any evidence that could shed light on how David had fallen to his death. The ladder, tools, and window frame were all carefully examined for signs of damage or tampering. However, nothing seemed out of place. No broken rungs, no structural issues. Everything appeared to be in perfect condition. Then, a breakthrough came. During a secondary sweep of the attic, the forensic team found an empty bottle of whiskey hidden beneath a pile of insulation. David had been sober for years, so why would he have an empty bottle hidden away in the attic? And why hadn't Sarah mentioned anything about it during her interviews? This discovery raised more questions. Was David drinking again, or had someone else placed the bottle there to cover their tracks? As detectives discovered the whiskey bottle in the attic. As his team arrived at the Hale home, they began meticulously examining the scene. The attic appeared undisturbed, with tools and materials neatly arranged. There were no signs of a struggle. But one question loomed large. How had David fallen? Miller directed his team to thoroughly inspect every inch of the attic. They examined the ladder, the window David had been installing, and all the tools he had been using. Nothing seemed out of place or defective. The renovation project had been progressing smoothly, and David was an experienced handyman. Fingerprints were taken from the ladder, tools, and window frame in the hope of uncovering some hidden clue. The autopsy report, however, raised more questions. While David's death was ruled a result of a fall that caused a broken neck, there were traces of alcohol in his system. This revelation shocked his friends and colleagues. David had been sober for years. Could he have relapsed on the day of his death? Or had something or someone caused him to drink again? Miller turned his attention to Sarah. She was clearly shaken, but something about her demeanor seemed off. During her initial interview, she mentioned that she and David had been arguing recently, primarily about their son, Victor. Sarah claimed David had become distant and irritable in the weeks leading up to his death, suggesting that his bipolar disorder and alcoholism could have contributed to his fall. But Sarah's account left much to be desired. She had no alibi for the exact time of the fall and insisted she had been downstairs working when it happened. The more Miller questioned her, the more inconsistencies began to emerge. Her calm demeanor seemed at odds with the traumatic event she had just experienced, raising suspicion in Miller's mind. As the investigation deepened, Miller couldn't shake the feeling that there was something darker at play. He began to wonder if David Hale's death was truly an accident, or if foul play had been involved. As Detective Miller and his team interviewed those closest to David, they began to uncover troubling details about his personal life, specifically his strained relationship with Sarah. Over the years, their marriage had unraveled, becoming a source of tension and public disputes. Several colleagues at the university recounted seeing the couple in heated arguments, their once stable partnership now hanging by a thread. One neighbor shared a particularly telling incident. Just days before David's death, he and Sarah had been seen shouting at each other in the driveway of their home. Sarah was furious, and David just walked away, the neighbor recalled. It was intense, like something major was going on between them. These revelations only deepened the investigators' suspicions. While Sarah admitted their marriage had been strained, she downplayed the severity of their disagreements. Could their relationship have been worse than she was letting on? Miller began to wonder if their marital tension had boiled over into something more deadly. they couldn't help but wonder if there was someone else involved. Suspicion briefly fell on one of David's colleagues, James Carr, a fellow professor at the university who had recently been seen in tense discussions with David. Investigators uncovered a few odd interactions between the two in the days leading up to David's death. Could James have pushed David back toward alcohol, or was there a deeper conflict between them? The detectives knew they couldn't ignore this lead, though it ultimately didn't pan out. The forensic team took fingerprints from the bottle, the ladder, and various tools in the attic. When the results came back, they made a startling discovery. There was a third set of fingerprints on the ladder that didn't belong to David or Sarah. The fingerprints belonged to Zoe Bronwick, a 22-year-old student at the university. Until now, Zoe had not been mentioned in the investigation, but her fingerprints placed her at the scene of David's death. This discovery changed everything. Who was Zoe, and what was she doing in the Hale home? Zoe was quickly brought in for questioning, and detectives began to realize that this case was much more complicated than they had initially thought. Zoe Bronwick was a bright, ambitious English literature student at the University of Colorado. She had been one of Sarah's students, and over the course of the semester, the two had developed a close relationship. What began as a mentor-student bond eventually evolved into something more, a secret affair that had been hidden from everyone, including David. Detectives were shocked by this revelation. As they dug deeper into the relationship between Sarah and Zoe, they learned that the affair had been going on for months. The two women had managed to keep their relationship under wraps, meeting in private and maintaining a facade of professionalism in public. But secrets have a way of surfacing. Just 2 days before his death, David had discovered the affair. David had begun noticing changes in Sarah's behavior long before the confrontation. She was distant, secretive, often glued to her phone late at night. One evening, while Sarah was out, David discovered a series of messages on her computer emails exchanged with Zoe. As he read through them, he realized with mounting horror the extent of their relationship. The betrayal hit hard, and David confronted Sarah, leading to the heated argument that set the stage for the final tragedy. According to colleagues, he had confronted Sarah about it, leading to a volatile argument. David felt betrayed and threatened to end their marriage, leaving Sarah devastated and desperate. This new information painted a different picture of the days leading up to David's death. Had the affair pushed him to the brink of despair, or had it given Sarah and Zoe a motive to eliminate him? Zoe, when confronted with the evidence, denied any involvement in David's death. She claimed that while she and Sarah were involved romantically, she had no reason to want David dead. However, the fact that her fingerprints were found on the ladder raised serious doubts about her innocence. Could Zoe have been present at the Hale home when David fell? And if so, what role did she play in the tragedy? As the investigation reached its climax, Detective Miller and his team turned up the heat on both Sarah and Zoe. The pressure was mounting, and detectives knew it was only a matter of time before someone cracked. Sarah remained adamant in her innocence, but the mounting evidence suggested otherwise. Zoe, on the other hand, was beginning to unravel. During an emotionally charged interrogation, she finally broke down and made a shocking confession. On the day of David's death, she had indeed been at the Hale house. Sarah had called her over, distraught after yet another argument with David. The three of them had ended up in the attic, where a confrontation ensued. According to Zoe, David had become enraged during the argument, threatening both her and Sarah. At first, Sarah tried to pin everything on Zoe during the investigation, claiming that Zoe had been the one to push David in a fit of jealousy. Zoe, overwhelmed with guilt and confusion, initially believed she might be responsible. It was only after hours of intense questioning that Zoe started to piece things together. Sarah had manipulated her, using her emotional vulnerability to deflect blame. Zoe's confession shifted, as she tearfully admitted her role, but pointed out that Sarah had been the one to strike the final blow. In the heat of the moment, Sarah had shoved David. The push was meant to end the argument, but it had unintended consequences. David lost his balance and fell from the attic to his death. Zoe insisted that it wasn't premeditated, that Sarah had acted in a moment of desperation and panic. With this confession, the case took a decisive turn. Sarah Hale was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, while Zoe was charged as an accessory to the crime. The once secret affair had come to light, and now both women would face the consequences of their actions. The trial of Sarah Hale captivated the town of Boulder, drawing media attention from across the state. Reporters filled the courtroom every day, eager to capture every detail of the case. The prosecution built a strong case, focusing on the affair between Sarah and Zoe, as well as the confrontation that led to David's death. Prosecutors argued that Sarah had been pushed to the breaking point. Her marriage to David was unraveling, and her secret relationship with Zoe was in jeopardy. The prosecution claimed that Sarah, in a fit of rage, had shoved David, causing his death, and then attempting to cover it up as an accident. The defense, however, painted a different picture. They argued that David's death had been a tragic accident, the result of an emotionally charged confrontation. They emphasized David's mental health struggles and pointed to the traces of alcohol found in his system as evidence that he may have been unsteady on his feet, leading to the fall. They also pointed out that Sarah had no prior history of violence and had acted in the heat of the moment. The trial was filled with emotional moments. At one point, Sarah broke down on the witness stand, expressing deep remorse for her actions. Zoe also took the stand, recounting the events of that fateful day. The courtroom was tense as both women described the confrontation and the moments leading up to David's death. After weeks of testimony and legal arguments, the jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned with their verdict, the courtroom fell silent with anticipation. Sarah Hale was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Zoe, who had cooperated with the investigation, was given probation and required to attend counseling for her involvement in the crime. The aftermath of David Hale's death left a lasting impact on the Boulder community. The university mourned the loss of a brilliant professor whose work had inspired countless students. His colleagues were left to grapple with the tragedy, shocked by the revelations about his personal life and the events that led to his untimely death. Victor Hale, David and Sarah's 13-year-old son, was perhaps the most affected by the tragedy. Left without a father and with his mother behind bars, Victor was taken in by relatives and moved away from Boulder. Once a bright student with a promising future, Victor's life was now marked by the trauma of losing both of his parents in such a devastating way. Victor struggled deeply after the loss of both parents. Taken in by his aunt, he battled with feelings of abandonment and confusion. Friends at school recalled how he seemed to retreat into himself, no longer the bright, engaged student they once knew. The burden of understanding his mother's involvement weighed heavily on him. As for Sarah, her conviction sent shockwaves through the university. Many of her colleagues had respected her as a scholar, but the revelations about her affair with Zoe and her role in David's death led many to question how well they really knew her. Sarah's once prominent career came crashing down, and her fall from grace was swift and brutal. Zoe, the young woman at the center of the affair, quietly disappeared from the public eye after the trial. She graduated from the University of Colorado and moved out of state, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a tarnished reputation. Her involvement in the tragic death of David Hale would remain a stain on her record for years to come. What do you think? Was David Hale's death an unfortunate accident, or was it a calculated murder driven by betrayal and desperation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life murder mysteries. Thank you for tuning in to Silent Crime Case. Join us next time as we dive into another haunting case that will leave you questioning the truth.